are set.
Ready?
Recording in progress.
Hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, October 24th, 2022. Mr. City Manager, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Wilmes. Councilmember Strawn.
Here.
Councilmember Etten.
Here.
Councilmember Groff.
Here.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And Councilmember Wilmes indicated ahead of the meeting that he was not able to be here this evening. We have with us at the dais our City Attorney Mark Goggin, who's on my right at the end of the dais, and our City Manager Pat Trudgeon on my left at the other end. We also have a number of staff, department heads, and others who will be participating in the meeting as we move through agenda items. This is a reminder to folks, if you do have a cell phone, to make sure to either silence it or otherwise assure that it won't disrupt the meeting this evening. And with that, Mr. Trudgeon, do we have any remote participants online?
Let me double check. Yes, we do have one attendee.
All right, it's just a reminder to folks who may be participating remotely online that when we come to the opportunity for public comment, there will be an opportunity for people who are participating remotely to speak as well. And the way that you can get our attention to do that is to use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. At the appropriate time. You don't have to do it at the beginning of the meeting and keep your hand up the whole time, but certainly at the particular moment when there is public comment offered that you wish to provide, that would be the time to use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. So this is an opportunity at the start of the meeting here to kind of acquaint yourself with those features if you're not already acquainted. With that, we'll ask folks to stand if they're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on tonight's agenda then is to approve the agenda. I'll check with staff. Are there any changes that need to be made from a staff perspective this evening?
No, there's not, Mr. Mayor.
All right. And are there any council requested changes to the agenda this evening or items that council members might like removed from consent for separate consideration?
No.
All right. We'll just do a quick check with folks participating remotely and here in the chambers. We do have at the end of our meeting a consent agenda, item 10, which has a handful of items A through D. Normally, those items are taken up as a single motion with limited opportunity for public comment or input. But if anyone is here to specifically either speak to or ask a question on one of those items, this would be a chance to let us know at this time, and we can take that item up earlier in the meeting. Specifically in the consent agenda, we have approval of our check register or payments. We have approval of a resolution requesting a SCORE funding grant from Ramsey County for recycling. We have approval or consideration of approval of a fast food drive-through near Walmart at Twin Lakes Parkway. We also then have consideration of a contract amendment for maintenance services for the water tower. If anybody is here for one of those items, this would be the chance to let us know, and we can take that item up earlier in the meeting. Is there anyone here for one of those items in the consent agenda? And if you're participating remotely and are here for one of those items, this would be the chance to use that raise your hand feature and let us know.
No.
No hand up? All right. With that, it looks like we can proceed with the agenda as presented. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, second by Councilmember Etten to approve the agenda as presented. No discussion, I'm presuming. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. We have our agenda this evening. Next on the agenda is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on this evening's agenda, but either may be related to city business or of interest to people in the community. Once again, we'll provide an opportunity for public comment as agenda items come up. But if you're here to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda, but once again relates to city business or is of interest to people in the city, this is your chance to speak on that this evening. We'll ask for folks that might be in the chambers to do that to come up and have a seat at one of the microphones at the table for that purpose. And for public comment, we request that the speaker identify themselves by their name and either their street or address if a Roseville resident or their city if not. For folks that are participating remotely, once again, if you're here to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda, this would be a chance to use that raise your hand feature and let us know, and we can bring you into the meeting for your comments. Is there anyone here to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? And no hands raised?
Correct.
All right. Then we'll close the opportunity for general public comment, and we'll move to Our first item under the rest of our agenda, which is under recognitions and donations, we have a proclamation related to Native American Heritage Month. I will read the proclamation, and then a motion to approve it would be in order. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the city of Roseville is located on land obtained through a broken treaty that was, a broken treaty, and the land was first home to the Dakota and Ojibwa people, where many continue to reside, and whereas the city of Roseville recognizes that this treaty entitled non-native people to live and work on traditional native lands, and whereas despite centuries-long and ongoing erasure of indigenous people from American history and unjust federal policies of assimilation and termination that ripped children from their families, Native American people have persevered, and whereas the indigenous people of this land upon which our country and city now stand have provided values and ideas that have become ingrained in American culture, including respect for the natural environment and rich cultural history, and whereas the city of Roseville is committed to promoting racial equity, equality, and justice as fundamental aspects of a safe and welcoming community, and to undo the long-standing trauma and harm of unjust government policies of assimilation and termination that have cost countless lives and displaced and broken up families. And whereas the city of Roseville invites all members of the community to join the federal government in celebrating and acknowledging 2022 National Native American Heritage Month. And whereas this observance offers increased opportunity to better understand Native American heritage, past and present contributions to our communities, and to honor the many indigenous people who have sacrificed their lives and customs for the growth of our nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the city of Roseville hereby proclaim the month of November 2022 as Native American Heritage Month.
Second.
All right, moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Any discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none, all those, Councilmember Groff.
I'd just like to say thank you. I know this is a couple years ago, but the Human Rights Inclusion and Engagement Commission did revise these, and I think this is a really good proclamation that we've come up with, so I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. If there's no other discussion, we have the motion before us to approve the proclamation of Native American Heritage Month in November of 2022 in Roseville. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. And the proclamation will be published and posted. That brings us then to our business items. We have no items removed from consent. Our first business item this evening is to receive an update on the underbilling of water customers in Roseville. We have our Finance Director, Michelle Petrick, with us this evening. The Finance Department is responsible for the water billing, and Ms. Petrick will provide us that update. Welcome.
And Mr. Mayor, I will begin just
okay.
just real quickly. As you noted, we're here to talk about the update on the underbilling. That is something we discovered that beginning in 2021, we have been charging the wrong rates when billing residential and commercial water users. The users that are classified as apartment or irrigation have been correctly billed. We did adopt a new tiered water rate in 2020 and did not properly enter the new tiered rates in the utility billing software system. So therefore, since January 1st, 2021, up until the billing cycle for July, August, September 2022, that just went out, we have the wrong tiered rates. We have the wrong calculation in the software, so the tiered rates were not factored in. It should be noted that of about the 9,200 residential customers we have, about 44% of the customers were not underbilled at all, meaning that they used 15,000 gallons or less during that period, and another 47% were underbilled less than $100 over those 18 months. So while there was a lot of people that were underbilled, in a lot of cases they weren't large amounts, we do have some customers that exceeded that amount over the 18 months. So Finance Director Petrick will get into the details of the underbilling, the breakdown of what that looks like, and discuss possible next steps. But before I do want to apologize to the council and the public for this error. This is something that we certainly do not want to have happen. We understand after the fact, going back takes a lot of work and could upset some customers, so we do understand that. So we're looking forward to the conversation tonight and how we maybe look to rectify this. We have taken measures to ensure that the future rate changes are entered correctly in the system, first of all. double and triple checked by other employees and audited on a regular basis to make sure, even if we think they're entered correctly, look at actual bills after the fact and make sure. And if there is a problem, we will then detect that much earlier than 18 months down the road. So once again, I do want to apologize to the council and to the public for this confusion. We have a lot of data here, and kudos to Michelle Petrick and her staff to try to dig up these numbers. It was literally throughout this afternoon just making sure we had current numbers here. So this is our best approximation of what the breakdown is here as far as what type of customers are affected. So with that, I'll turn over to Michelle, and she'll walk through the breakdown of it a little bit, and as I said, talk then about potential solutions as we move forward here. So with that.
Thank you.
Well, as Pat mentioned, 44% of our residential customers were not underbilled. They used less than 15,000 gallons per quarter for each of the quarters. We have approximately 28 accounts that exceeded $500 during that period. 800 accounts in the $100 to $500 range. And the average underbilling you will see in this column. For the under $100 account, they average $23 for those accounts. In the $100 to $500 range, the average is $198, and the over $500 is $740. In the commercial area, we have 843 total accounts. 506 did not exceed the lowest tier or weren't underbilled. And for commercial, the lowest tier goes up to 60,000 gallons. We had 140 businesses, commercial accounts, that were underbilled less than $100. 142 commercial accounts in the $100 to $1,000 range. 52 commercial accounts in the $1,000 to $10,000 range, and 3 accounts over $10,000. So in total, residential accounts were underbilled $279,000. Commercial accounts were underbilled $535,000. And the total between both groups is slightly under $815,000. When compared to the total usage that was billed for all accounts, the underbilling as a percentage of the total is 11% of our accounts were underbilled. They were billed for the water they used, they were just billed at the lowest tiered rate. And we did get it corrected with the bills that went out at the end of September. And as the city manager mentioned, we have instituted some new procedures for double and triple checking rates going forward. Some additional information to consider. During this period of time, we paid St. Paul Water $8.5 million for water. We purchased our water from St. Paul Regional Water. The water fund had personnel costs and operating supply costs of $2.5 million and debt service of $301,000 during this time period. So approximately $11.3 million in expenditures. Our total consumption revenue was $6.9 million. This is what we billed. This excludes the flat base rate that we charge all the customers. And then Arden Hills also paid us $1.5 million during that period of time as they purchase water from us that we purchase from Regional Water. Some additional revenues and expenses within the water fund. Our flat rate revenues, our flat base rate, totaled $3.4 million during this period of time, and capital outlay and depreciation was $2.7 million during that point in time. So we discovered the error. We found where the glitch in the system was. We got it fixed. And then we started discussing what to do about the 814,000 underbilled, which is why we're here today asking for guidance on what you would like us to do with regard to that underbilling. And the options range anywhere from collecting all of it, going back to January 2021, both residential and commercial, to doing nothing, to collecting only commercial accounts, to collecting only for 2022, going back 12 months from when it was corrected, which was the Finance Commission recommendation. I included a copy of the draft minutes from that commission meeting, so you can see the variety of discussion and options that were discussed. And so we're here to ask you what you would like us to do.
Great, thank you, Ms. Petrick. So our process for this agenda item, as with many, is we'll start with questions from the council for staff, and then we'll provide an opportunity for public comment, and then we'll go to a council discussion about options and what we might like to do going forward. So are there questions for staff, first of all, from the council? Councilmember Etten and then Councilmember Strong.
Well, Ms. Petrick, you, the Finance Commission, recommended going back and doing a one-year look back. What month would that go back to? Is that back to August of last year, September, June? How far back does that 12-month look back?
August.
Okay. And then have you looked at how much of a difference that would, if we went back and took that amount, how much of a difference are we from being in that $814,000 hole?
For residential, it would be roughly 120,000. I don't have the data for commercial accounts because that came in at 4:45 this evening. So
When you say 120, that's what would not have been recovered if we went back?
that's what would be recovered out of the 278,000,
For residential.
Okay,
roughly.
thank you.
So roughly about 50% going back 12 months. Councilmember Strong.
I was curious, had this rate change been advertised or communicated to the public and at one time, or repeated times over this period?
Repeated. We published it when when the council first approved it. We had an insert in the water, or in the utility bills. We've had an article in the Roseville News each year when the rates change. We have updated rates on our website. We have a note on our utility bills that if people want more information, to go to our website. I believe we did an insert in January of this year, but I'm not 100% certain.
And just curious, I recall seeing these, but I want to know, I don't recall if it had given the corrected amount. Did it list the correct amount on those inserts so that people know what they were supposed to be being charged?
We sent, the insert that went into the utility bills had the current
Okay.
tiered rates. The utility bills themselves just list consumption on the bill, just total consumption. We are pushing our software company to allow us to set up tiered rates. I'll be honest, I looked at what the system's coming up with, and it's not easy to understand, but we are trying to get it out there. So if you do hit more than one rate, you'll see how much.
Okay.
Councilmember Strawn and Mr. Mayor, if I could just add to that. So as Finance Director Petrick mentioned, we did try to communicate that as much as possible. I think where there is probably still a disconnect is the actual bill. It's awfully hard to understand. We've been working and trying to improve people being able to see that a little bit better. We still need to continue to work on that, and we will, and some of that is the limitations of the software we have, but we're trying to work around that. When we did communicate, once the error was discovered and the bills were going out, we did put an insert in with the current rates and the fact that folks were underbilled. But individuals did not receive the exact dollar amount because at the time we did not know that this is the way the timing was. We now have that information, so we're better able to communicate what that undercharge would be. And once again, depending on what the council decides to do, what we'll communicate with that. So that did take us some time to dig that up. So just want to make sure we clearly answered your question.
Thank you.
Right, are there questions from the council for staff? All right. With that, then, we'll provide an opportunity for public comment. If anybody from the public wishes to speak to this matter and any thoughts you might have about how you would like to see the city address the underbilling and collection of any or part of the amount that was underbilled or amounts, this would be an opportunity to weigh in on that. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to that at this time, feel free to come up to the table and sit in front of one of the microphones for that purpose. Or if somebody's participating remotely online and wishes to speak to this, use that raise your hand feature in Zoom and let us know. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? And do we have any hands raised?
We do not.
Feel free to come on up. And once again, for public comment, we just ask that you state your name and address or street if you're a Roseville resident and your city if not. And we do have a 3-minute time limit, but most people don't come close. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Elijah. I live at 1293 Japer Avenue West. I wasn't actually planning on speaking on this. I came for another issue. But I just wanted to say, one thing I wanted to suggest is, one, it sounds to me like there was a software issue, and I don't know if you guys are having repeated issues with the software, you might want to change companies that you contract with if you are contracting with a software company. And the second thing I was going to say is I think it's probably not the best idea to try to get this from people after the fact. I know I took accounting, especially for businesses in particular. I'm a college student. The way most businesses do accounting, this could really mess up a lot of businesses, in particular small businesses that like restaurants and places like that might rely on these numbers. And so if you try to go back and get this money from them after the fact, this could really, I think, hurt Roseville's business community as well as hurt some residents who, weren't budgeting for this extra cost if you are planning to try to get it back that way. That was the one thing I was going to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item? All right, if there isn't anyone else, then we appreciate the comments, and I believe we did receive some input from members of the public via email as well, and so we've got that. I had a follow-up question for Ms. Petrick, so be ready for that. I did also want to note, just in response to the comment, I believe what we had was an issue with the entry of information by our own people into the software, which is how the problem first occurred. And then I think that what was talked about in terms of software further was that it's not easy for residents to see sort of the transparency of the calculation of how their usage of X turns into a bill of Y. And so I think that's something we're trying to find better software for in terms of that communication with the customers.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, we are currently going through a process now to replace our financial software across the board, including utility billing. So very likely there will be a change in companies that provide us this. And this example is a great learning tool for us as we look at new software to make sure we have the ability to properly communicate our utility bills, for instance, better than we have now.
All right. And Ms. Petrick, if you can bring up that spreadsheet again, if you are able to do that. So one of the things I noted in the information down below was that, so our total cost to St. Paul Water was about 8.5 million. And our total revenue, and I'm presuming that the consumption plus Arden Hills is what we billed and receive payment for. So that doesn't include the under-billed amounts. So we
Correct.
received about 8.4 million. So we did not even, with our consumption revenue, recover our cost to St. Paul for the purchase of the water. It's fairly close, within 100 plus, 1,000 plus or minus, but we didn't completely cover that, and we certainly didn't cover our personnel and supplies and debt service with the amount that we collected in revenue on usage.
From consumption revenue.
Right.
Yes.
And I understand that a portion of our flat rate does go towards, towards paying for the operating expenses, and so I understand that. But it seems fairly clear that we do need to try to recover this underbilled amount, which would actually get our revenue up from 8.4 up to about 9.24 million if we were able to collect all of it. So it seems, from my perspective, that it makes sense to try to do that recovery. I take the message to heart too that there is a pain to users and customers in terms of having to pay it. The flip side of that, I suppose, is that there is a pain to the rest of the users having to sort of cover other people's bills that they should have been correctly charged for, and so that's always where we start to get into that question of fairness. But at least my analysis of sort of the numbers, does that make sense as to how I'm looking at that?
That's correct.
Okay. Other thoughts from the council or suggestions as to an approach? Councilmember Etten.
Ms. Petrick, I wasn't at the meeting last week, but I understand that part of Eller's presentation was a discussion or maybe even a plan to make up for some of these dollars in the 2023 rates. Is that accurate, or am I incorrect in understanding that?
In the utility rates, the Ellers factored in collecting a portion of the total. They used the top 10 commercial accounts in the cash flow that supports the rates. And our cash reserves are low, so yes, a portion is built in.
From the business accounts or from across the game?
For the portion that we don't collect.
For residential and commercial.
Whatever it would be if we
So
did
they-
not collect it all.
So the benchmark they used was the top 10 commercial to get a dollar amount, but it's not that we're putting those people off the hook.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
it's just
It's just a
that,
number to put in there.
which is something over 200,000
So any,
based on the numbers.
It was
So-
$272,000.
okay, so I think it's clear then, even looking at that potential plan, that anything not collected from the people who used the water in the last year and a half will be paid by the whole city? Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts from council members? Councilmember Strawn?
I just want to make sure I'm mathing correctly here. So my understanding on the commercial is that someone who would have been underbilled, they would have normally been at, they were billed 498 if they were over 400,000 gallons per quarter. They should have been billed 523, but they were actually billed 498. Is that correct?
You're crossing years.
I am. So what were they actually billed then?
The commercial or the resident?
The commercial.
Commercial accounts were at 318, which is the lowest tier.
Okay, so even if they were at 400,000, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We-
that's,
Everybody got billed for the gallons they used. They just got billed all at the lowest
Right.
tier.
okay. Obviously, though, people who are in that highest range, who are owing 68,000, are not your small businesses.
No.
These are larger employers who are using this in their production of some type of product or something like that.
That is correct. They are very large commercial accounts.
Okay, and that's just 3 for an average of $68,000. And then we have 50 who are in about 4,000 to 5,000. And this dollar amount that's presented here is the entire 18 months that we're discussing, right? Okay, thank you.
Other questions or thoughts from council members? And just to sort of finish the thought on that, so the three accounts that averaged about 68,000 of underbilling, we did collect about 390,000 from them, but they're still, or excuse me, we did collect on average about 129,000, 130,000 from them. So conceivably, their underbilling is, close to half, if not a little above or below half of what they did pay. So while it's a significant amount for them, it's also a significant portion of our revenue, if that makes sense. And I believe if I'm correct, one of the options that is suggested is a collection of the underbilled amounts over time. Right.
Yep.
Councilmember Strawn.
Is there a possibility of not one of these options as presented, but a separate one? One where we would fully bill our commercial accounts and we could spread that out over time, but that we look at a different parameter for our residential accounts, possibly accepting the Finance Commission recommendation of going back 1 year, but also still allowing for split payments. I don't know, I'm sure you can't just whip off numbers off the top of your head as far as what the financial implication is. I'm very uncomfortable with going back to the start of this for residential customers, especially given the situation where some of the responders noted that, they didn't even live in the home. That is absolutely, and we wouldn't.
Well, the other thing to add to that, our numbers are based on active accounts, so if a house or a business sold during this period of time, we're not factoring in that water usage to the new homeowner or the new business owner. And there's as many options as you want to come up with. We just kind of put down some of the ones that were discussed.
I'd just like to add, I'm most comfortable with going back no farther than 2022, the start of this year, for residential users.
Other council thoughts? Councilmember Groff.
Given that we've been talking about the budget for the last few months, this money's going to have to come from somewhere, so I think we all need to keep that in mind. It's going to have to be made up somewhere. It's either made up by the people who use the water at the tier that was not charged correctly, or it's going to be made up by all the taxpayers. So I'm just putting that thought out there.
I think one of the things, too, to note, both on the business side and on the residential side, is that a significant portion of the accounts did not get underbilled and so would not owe anything
Correct.
unless we charge them to recover what was underbilled for other customers. And so I think that, when you think about impacts, especially to perhaps people who have small households and not a lot of income, and it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you have a large household and not a lot of income, I understand that. Certainly, the more we transfer to everybody, the more impact we're having on, everybody. And so, I think I'm most interested in being fair to everyone. I'm most interested in recovering the amounts from the people who should have paid it in the first place, as opposed to spreading it across others. And in fact, I would argue to back out the $272,000 that was figured into the 2023 rates, because I don't think it makes sense to sort of build that into our rates going forward, because it's always going to be there. We're not going to remember to take it out in 2024 before we add back in to cover costs. It doesn't work that way usually. Usually a rate ratchets up, but it doesn't necessarily ratchet back down. And so my thought is that we recover, all of the amounts from the appropriate people. I think it's okay to give people the 4 quarters to, 1 year to recover it. I think that gives people an opportunity to budget for it. And I think that we need to do a good job communicating this solution that we may implement here. Councilman Braden.
I would start with, I would agree with that, and I think the statements from Member Groff. If we were to do a four-quarter payment plan, obviously we roll these out over time. When would that kind of thing start?
Well, I would anticipate we'd start it with the first quarter of 2023, because we're going to have to notify people
Okay.
of the amount that they were underbilled and give them the option of spreading it over 4 quarters or not. For some accounts, we're talking less than $1. I hate to say it, but if you went over 1,000 gallons, you were underbilled 80 cents. So, if we want to do all the accounts, we'll have to notify everybody individually who was underbilled. Now, keep in mind, almost 50% of our accounts weren't underbilled. And in all likelihood, we might have to send them a letter stating, your account's been analyzed and you weren't underbilled.
Councilmember Strawn.
Have you calculated what it costs us per bill to send these out? Often I hear, it's $8 to send a check by the time it's signed and all the people touch it. I mean, would you expect we're in that $8 to $10 per bill at least to send it to people? By the time we do all the calculations and we send the explanation and we have the follow-up?
We have all the calculations. It should be a simple matter of doing a mail merge, because we've got data for we looked at every account for all the quarters, and my assistant's a whiz with pivot tables. So I would envision it wouldn't cost us quite that much
But
to
at
send
least,
out letters.
at least $5 or $6 by the time you
Yeah.
calculate in staff time. So it doesn't make sense. It would cost us more to tell people that they are that they owe us 80 cents.
Councilmember Etten.
I think you brought up an interesting point, Ms. Petrick, in that potentially we would need to notify the people who weren't underbilled in the effort to make sure we're communicating at this point. And I think that's something we have a great responsibility at this point to do, to make sure we're openly communicating with the public, hey, we had this thing and you aren't underbilled, that's great, but to make sure that we are direct and clear. I think it will help clear up confusion in the community over this. And so I would be in favor of a full customer, full city, full customer notification that is based on whether they were underbilled or not, and then how much they would need to repay.
And I would just add too that, I understand sort of the point of it costs us money.
Yep.
I think that is a little bit of the cost of doing business. I know that sometimes I've received refund checks that are very small from entities who are correcting something, so it does happen, and I understand there's a cost to do that. The other piece of it, though, is that I think we may want to think about a threshold for spreading it out over 4 quarters versus just paying it in one payment. I mean, if it's below a certain dollar amount, either commercial or residential, whatever that dollar amount is, then it probably doesn't even make sense to give the option to spread it out, and that might simplify things for us as well. I'm not sure what that threshold is at this point, but maybe we can think about that. Councilmember Etten.
I would concur with that. That's certainly one simplification for this billing process, I think. Certainly, if we're looking at residential, that under $100 group would reduce work and confusion significantly. If it was, the average amount is $23. So I think that staff may be looking at where we hit the greatest impact and where the greatest pain might be felt by account folks. That would make sense to be thoughtful and not creating a 4-quarter plan just because.
Councilmember Groff.
I would like to add that I do think we have to communicate with everyone because this needs to be clarified, as Councilmember Etten said. And the other reason we need to do that is because the rate, the tiers, they need to be aware that if they do go above that tier, their rate would be higher. There's probably going to be a lot of clarification needed after this, so we're going to have to work on that part of it. The concern I had about this initially was that someone who's on a very low fixed income would have a problem, but I think just intuitively, I'm guessing most of those people don't reach the threshold because it's I'm just thinking from people I meet door knocking, it's probably a single older person who lives alone, and they would not be using the maximum water. So I'm hoping that they aren't, someone on a social security check is not getting hit with this.
Yeah, that is true. The majority of our residents that are in the below 15,000 are one or two person household.
And then just to follow up on that, what do we do if there is a hardship for someone, or what, do we have a policy on that, or is there some way we can work that out?
Well, we do have our discount program for
For
people
sewer.
that qualify for assistance.
Okay.
That's only for sewer, though.
That's for sewer only? Oh.
Yes.
We may want to consider looking at that differently. I don't know that that's a conversation
No,
for this
no.
evening.
No, I agree, I just wanted to
Yeah.
say that.
Anything else on this? So if there's action that needs to come back before the city council, or maybe a final plan proposal for council approval, is that kind of what staff would be expecting? Or is staff looking to take the direction and move based on this evening?
We would hope if you can get there, you can give us direction, because it'll take some work to get ramped up. So whatever guidance you can give us, I'm not sure where you're going to end up necessarily, but if you want a break point on collecting for 4 quarters or just one fell swoop, I would maybe suggest $25. Anything beyond that might be a big amount for people to pay in 1 month. It aligns very well with the average cost for those that are billed under 100, so meaning if you owe $25 or less, we bill that as part of a quarterly bill. If it's more than that, then you have the option to do it over 4 months. I'm not sure how you would look at commercial, if you look at that differently, or just use that average for that 100 to 1,000, which is $581, but just something to think about.
Well, actually, I would note that the lowest tier, so to speak, of commercial averages about $31, which is fairly close to that $25 amount. So maybe that's a good number for both sides of the equation, and it's 100-some accounts.
Yep.
Councilmember Breton?
I'm wondering if, especially if we look at a universal thing between, I don't know if we need to, but between residential and commercial, that 25 might be a little bit low in the sense that we're going to catch several of the things that are just above that, or with the average of the commercial at 31, you're going to catch a lot of them. So either splitting it out and maybe putting it at 50. One of the reasons I asked about the timing for this is this will land in January when people's water bills tend to be lower, as they're not doing outdoor things. So it might be better to be upfront with that, and maybe a $50 amount would catch the vast majority of the city's residential customers and catch the majority of the commercial accounts. That for me.
I'm comfortable
So we
with
don't
$50.
hang that out longer than needed.
I think that would be cleaner, $50.
And certainly nothing to stop somebody that owes more than that to pay in one
Right,
one
and
swoop.
some will.
Some people will.
Right, because I think for
especially
anybody
businesses.
over that, we're giving them the option.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we charging them extra to spread it out, or is it just the same? Okay.
No interest.
They
no,
charge for that.
nothing.
And it's spread out quarterly, so it'd be 4 quarters.
4 quarters, yeah.
So by the end of next year, we'd be caught up, in theory.
If they're-
And we do send out a utility bill to someone, to 1/3 of the city basically every month. So we don't, it's not like everybody gets them in January, everybody gets them in
Right.
March. It's spread out over the year, so. But you're right, that the first 3-month billings are always pretty low for the usage
Yeah.
that was the previous quarter. Yeah. Councilmember Etten?
Do you need a motion?
I think that would be good.
Yes, if you can
Okay.
get one.
I would do a motion to collect all active accounts that were underbilled from January 2021 to August 2022, with the offer of spreading out the underbilling over 4 quarters, anything above $50. Does that encompass that properly?
Do we want to talk about what the impact on the 2023 usage rates?
Yes. Well, I don't, do we want that as a part of that, or is that a separate discussion under our utility rates discussion?
Utility rates will be coming back on November 7th, and then the final approval. So I suspect you can discuss that.
All right. Don't lose the thought, though.
I'll second
We won't lose that.
Councilmember Ratten's motion so we can have a discussion.
All right. So Councilmember Ratten's motion is to look at all accounts that were underbilled for the entire period of time and offer an option to pay over 4 quarters for any account that was underbilled by over $50 during that period, whether it's residential or commercial. All right. Discussion of the motion as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Ratten.
Yeah, this was a big error, and I will apologize. We aren't in the business of covering that kind of detail, finer detail, but we don't want this to happen to our residents and our businesses, and understand this will create a problem for some people, and we're going to work to make that as possible, as good as possible, I guess. The tiered rates were put in place for a reason. They were put in place to encourage folks to use less water. And that's why it was there. It's very much a part of our larger environmental work. And while this is highlighted in a really negative way, I guess it highlights it in some way. And we didn't want to have it happen this way, but we need the funds to take care of our water system, and we do want to encourage folks to not use tons and tons of water as we take care of the earth and the environment. So I am supportive, obviously, of my own motion, and look forward to how we can work this out and work well with our community going forward.
All right. And as the seconder, Councilmember Groff.
And I would reiterate a lot of that. I mean, I do apologize to the public. This is not something that the council really figures out in detail, and sometimes things like this happen. We're sorry for that. But we do have to collect funds from somewhere. Our budget has to be balanced, and we have been trying to do some makeup period in our some of our funds already. So we have to do this in as fair a way as we can. So I see this as an opportunity for us to recoup it within a year and be back on track. I just want to reiterate one thing, though. People would not be paying if they just moved into the home within the last month or 2 or 3 during this period. Did we decide if we're going to go back and collect from the previous owners?
I'm not sure that we
Nearly.
can.
Okay.
Be a challenge.
Okay, so that would just be a write-off, okay.
Right. So some portion of it would end up,
Being gone.
being borne by the rest of the payers, but I think that's about the
Okay.
smallest portion we can work with. Any other discussion on the motion, Councilmember Strong?
I continue to be opposed as the plan, just because I think it's not fiscally prudent to bill all folks. I think there should be a cutoff, but that's as someone who's been a bookkeeper and accountant person, finance manager, and so I think there could be a different way, but obviously we do need to recover a great deal of the funds, or the whole community bears the brunt of this error.
All right, and I'm supportive of the motion. I think we've had a pretty good discussion about all of the issues and the possibilities and the options that we have. There may be an accounting or fiscal component to it, but I think there's also sort of the fiduciary responsibility that we have to our public funds. And so I think that's an important aspect of our job, and we need to be careful that we are being mindful of that in how we make our decisions. So I'm supportive of the motion. With that, we have the motion before us, the Etten motion to collect from all accounts for the entire period, with the option to pay over 4 quarters for anybody over $50 in underbilled amount. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That passes 3-1. Councilmember Strawn in opposition. All right, that then brings us, thank you again to the accounting folks and to our consultant, and special thanks for Ms. Petrick for indulging my need for that spreadsheet that we have as a handout this evening. I think that helps to put a big picture together. With that, then we'll move on to our next business item, which is item 7B, and that's to discuss a possible path forward regarding a THC product regulation. And we'll just leave it at THC and not attempt to pronounce the term. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Trudgeon to introduce this item and some of the questions that you'd like feedback from the council on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, we're here to discuss the sale of THC products in Roseville, specifically regulations around that. As you know, the state legislature recently passed a law in this last session that allows for the sale of THC products that have concentrations of Delta-9 THC, which is an intoxicating ingredient. Specifically, the law only allows the sale of THC products to persons 21 years or older and require that edible products cannot have more than 5 milligrams of any THC type per edible or 50 milligrams of any THC type per package. Without, I would note there's no limit on the number of packages that could be sold. We discussed this previously in August. In fact, August 8th, the City Council did institute a moratorium for up to 1 year to study the new law and look at the proper regulatory framework for the sale of THC products in Roseville. As noted in the RCA, it's an attachment C, other cities have created a licensing framework for the sale of THC products. And control, if I could have the computer monitor screen. And I'll just put that up here. It's in the packet. Find my mouse, there we are. And so this is, let me get that a little bit bigger. So this is what other cities have done. So I just want to have that as information to keep in mind. Specifically, we're asking the council to weigh in on 3 councils. I would note we do not have an ordinance written per se tonight. We're not considering an ordinance to pass tonight. We are looking for additional feedback from council and members of the public of what should be in there. So specifically, the questions we would ask the council to weigh in on is, would you like to have the ordinance to have parameters on where THC products can be sold? As you can see from the chart, many cities do not have specific guidance on where these products can be sold beyond that they cannot be sold out of the home, perhaps as a part of a home occupation or a mobile business. There's also a state law restricting the sale of these products in liquor stores as well. The net results is really that they can be sold in any business, assuming they get a license to sell that product. I would note that, and you'll see in the chart, there are several cities set up the licensing framework similar to tobacco licenses, including, which would include compliance checks, administrative fines. It does not appear that those cities limit the sale of those products just to tobacco stores. They're just using that framework to really set up the process for applying for a license and ensuring that the law is maintained. The second question is whether there should be a limit on the amount of licenses that sell THC products. As this council well knows, with tobacco licenses and massage therapy establishments, that given the regional nature of Roseville, we could very quickly have a large amount of THC retailers in Roseville. We have 20-plus tobacco license holders and 20-plus massage therapy establishments that can be a burden on the city to ensure regular compliance with all the laws, specifically the laws prohibiting the sale of products to minors and ensuring that illegal activities do not occur in those premises. I would note we do have a precedent for limiting the amount of licenses. As you all know, we do limit the amount of off-sale liquor licenses to 10 in the city of Roseville, and that's been that way since at least the 1980s. But having said that, and looking at what other cities have done so far to date, we do not see a limit that any city has placed on the number of THC licensed establishments are allowed. And then finally, the last question we have in regards to whether there should be an administrative fine structure for violations similar to tobacco and liquor licenses, which has presumptive penalties in place. Specifically, we have fines and suspensions on an increasing scale based on of severity based on the number of violations within a certain time period. We did include the tobacco ordinance as a bench handout tonight, so you can see how that's structured. You get 1 violation and 2 violations, and it goes up and increasing in fines and suspension, meaning that they cannot sell those products for a period of time. From our review, it does look like several other cities are instituting penalties for noncompliance, very similar to their tobacco and liquor license penalties. One question I didn't put in the RCA, but something that's probably relevant, is looking at fees. We do have the annual fees that some are proposing. Our current tobacco license fee is $200 with $300, I believe, for a background check. You'll see they range from kind of that amount to very high amounts in a couple of cities. Those seem to be modeled over, from what I understand, similar to the liquor licenses, the fee that they have in there. So, looking forward to the discussion and any feedback, happy to answer any questions. I know we do have members of the public here in person and online that certainly will want to weigh in. We did notify all the retailers that we could think of, as well as people that have previously testified on this item and other advocates for THC products. So I think we have a good turnout of people here to weigh in on this possible regulations. As I said, we don't have an ordinance in front of you tonight. That's something that will come down the road here, but we want to have this discussion. So with that, I'll stop and be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Once again, the process will be to start with the presentation, which we just had, questions from the council for staff, and then we'll go to public comment, and then we'll go back to council consideration, mainly to provide recommendations to staff as to what to bring forward, if anything, for a regulation ordinance to follow up this meeting. With that, are there questions for staff at this time? Councilmember Strawn.
Can, City Manager Trudgeon, are you able to illuminate us on the wide range of licensing fees? Is it really a preventive measure in the case of $10,000, $700? $10,700 and a $500 background fee when we're saying tobacco is $250 here in Roseville?
Well, I don't know the specific reasons, but I can assume that since those license fees are the same as a liquor license, given that THC products are intoxicating, their approach may have been that it's a similar like process and potential issues surrounding that, so they would charge a license fee. I think our philosophy has always been make sure we're charging the license fee appropriate to the amount of time and work we need to do around that. I should know this, but I offhand don't know what our liquor license fee, but I think it's more than $250, much more sizable given the potential issues that arise from those places. But that's my best guess, and there was a couple, I think it was Woodbury and one other city that had very high license fees.
I did want to note I did take a look at the liquor license fees in Roseville, and also they are regulated pretty heavily, liquor license fees, by state law as well. The high fees tend to be for on-sale establishments where people are actually consuming alcohol at the establishment, because I think everybody recognizes a great deal of risk associated with that to the public. I believe the state statutes actually cap the license fee for off-sale liquor stores at a pretty low amount. It's a few $100s or something along those lines, maybe not too much more than our tobacco license fee of $200 plus the $300 background check, something in that range. So I would maybe just note that I don't believe that the intention of retail sales of these THC products is for consumption on site. Certainly that is something we could probably regulate as part of this. I think of it more as a sale, but something we probably want to talk about if that is, or maybe hear from the public about as well, if that is a model that we need to be aware of and looking at in our regulation, because that might change what we look at in terms of license fees, similar to what the issues are with liquor licenses. Other questions for staff? Councilmember Groff?
So one of the costs I see coming down the road is the testing, and we'll have, I assume this will be probably, we haven't got it in front of us, but it'll be similar to what we do with tobacco testing to be sure they're on underage sales, so that will take some officers' time, and maybe we can model it after that. The more venues we have in the city that sell this, the more testing we're going to need to do, so those are just some things that have gone through my mind that we need to consider.
Sure, and Councilmember Groff, when you say testing, you mean the compliance checks?
Compliance
Not-
checks.
We're not talking about product
No,
testing.
no.
Just wanted to be sure.
Well, that is a whole nother conversation perhaps, I don't know.
Right. Other questions for staff? Councilmember Strawn?
Deeper in some of the information, there was concern about restriction of items with trace amounts of THC, although I was surprised that cannabis got mixed in there as well. Is that something you're looking for guidance on as well, whether or not we're regulating face masks and other things that have trace amounts of some of these substances.
No, I don't think that's the intent. I think it's, as if I remember right, 0.3% of THC or less, and that could have been in the state law as well. I think there was this parameters of what could be allowed, so we would need to be very explicit that this does not cover, if the council chooses, any products that have trace amounts, which I think is defined as 0.3%.
Yeah, it's 0.3%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
less, and I think that's been what I've seen in other ordinances. They were very direct on that, just to make sure it was clear.
Other questions? One thing I noticed in a couple of the sample ordinances, one was discussion, and it's in, I think it's in our tobacco ordinance as well, about or about prohibiting sampling, or providing samples, basically, essentially free or reduced cost samples. I think that may be something we want to think about. The other was regulating consumption on the premise, specifically Shoreview prohibited that. So that might be something we want to think about. And I just want to double check if there was anything else that I noted. I did note that the two, at least the two ordinances that we had, both followed the tobacco model of not allowing sales in movable places of business. Although the definition of that was a little different between the two cities. I also noted that in at least one of the ordinances, they talked about the display being in, sort of behind the counter, if you will, and not sort of available for public to take off the shelf. And then I think that was the main thing, if I remember right. There was, Shoreview also did have a restriction on the sale through home occupations, but I'm wondering if we define retail establishments properly in our ordinance, if we cover that adequately then and don't have to get into that.
Most likely.
Councilmember Groff.
Mayor, one other thing I think I noticed is that the background check was a little more thorough in the Golden Valley ordinance, because it included spouses, so that they hadn't had any fines against them. And I think that might be important, because I don't think it happens too often, but there are times where one person is in trouble and then they just change the name to.
I was just looking to see if our ordinance about tobacco talked about that, and we may want to
Yeah, we may want to.
beef up that language, if appropriate.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Trudgeon.
Thank you. Thanks to our deputy clerk who was watching from home. She gave me the fee numbers. So the on-sale liquor license is $7,200. The wine and beer liquor licenses range from $850 to $1,600, but off-sale liquor is $300. So that just gives you a sense of kind of what we're charging for other similar type of things.
And it's that off-sale number that is
Off-sale.
definitely state regulated,
Yep.
and we cannot exceed the $300 unless they change state law.
Interesting.
All right, other questions for staff? All right, why don't we open this up then for public comment? And just to review the process for public comment, we do have the 3-minute time limit per speaker, which I try to enforce gently as much as possible, and you can say a lot in 3 minutes. If you have more, perhaps you have a written testimony and you're reading from, if you have more and can provide a copy to Mr. Trudgeon at the end of your testimony, if you run out of time, we can make sure and get that to the council for the full information that you're wanting to provide. If you have questions, those will be directed to us, and then we'll do follow-up at the end of the public comment period after everybody's had a chance to speak to attempt to address questions. And then also, once again, begin your comments with your name and your address or street if you're a Roseville resident, or your city if not. If you're representing an organization, it's always good to know that as well. If your name isn't a name that's easy to commonly know how to spell, once you're done with your comments, you can step off to the side, and there is a clipboard. You can just write your name down so that we make sure and get the spelling correct in the record. I believe those are all the parameters I wanted to make sure and go through. If we have a number of speakers who want to speak, we do have the 2 microphones, so feel free to queue up at the next chair. If somebody's speaking at one of the microphones, then we can just kind of keep rotating back and forth. And if you're interested in speaking and both chairs are full, you can kind of queue up in one of the front rows just to be ready to if you'd like to do that, just to keep things moving along. With that, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment and welcome folks to speak. And also, I'll note at some point, maybe after one or two people speak who are here, we'll go ahead and bring in the person who's persons participating remotely to try to mix them in as well. With that, go ahead and whoever wishes to speak, come on and have a seat at the table.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having us. My name is Ben Lipkin. I'm the co-founder of North Star Hemp. We founded in 2019. Our farm's in Rogers, Minnesota, fully organic, fully seed-to-shelf, fully integrated company. We've grown over 220,000 plants over the last 4 years, all by hand. To date, this is Brock Friesen, our head of sales and education. To date, we only work with health professionals, so chiropractors, physical therapy, massage, acupuncture. We work with numerous health sciences. We actually just got asked to build curriculum for one of the very large health sciences universities in the Midwest. And then we just entered terms with Rochester Mayo of the Oncology Cancer Research and Treatment Center to really help educate the community and get the message across. There are more therapeutic options than opiates and pain pills. I've always done something that I have a passion for and purpose in, and mainly taking it from my mom, being a caretaker, helping other people. I had a very, very successful career in the NFL, working for a company that Jerry Jones owns, called Legends. Through my travels, I was working in LA through that time, selling that stadium. My wife and I went through 3 failed IVFs. My wife was diagnosed with 2 autoimmune diseases. It tore me apart. I knew I needed to come home and be there for my family. Being raised, there's a total place for Eastern medicine and Western medicine. Being raised and going to an 8K chiropractic my whole life, I knew there were other options to heal without the side effects. We're simply here to hopefully erase any stigma or unknown in education that Mr. Mayor and the council might have.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Brock Friesen. I'm the head of sales and education here. And that's the biggest thing is, right, educating people so they know what this is, right? When families go to restaurants and bars and their kids know what alcohol is, right? Everybody keeps comparing it to tobacco and liquor. Is it the same? There are some similarities, but there's a lot of things that make it different as well. And again, playing safe, making sure it's safe for our community, and understanding the education that goes behind it so they know what it is and how to use it and how to use it properly. Again, regulating like the certain packaging you're using, right? Child-proof packaging. It's not see-through. There's no cartoon characters on it, right? Again, pushing that more to adults, and then playing within those limits, right? 5 milligrams per serving, not to exceed 50 milligrams per package. Knowing you're getting it from a reliable company, so they're not going out of the line, going out of the lines and stacking different things that are in there that you're unsure of. Again, these is very new. People are still, getting used to what CBD is, and then now THC comes along and trying to, differentiate the two of them, right, between marijuana and hemp, and what are they. And again, working with the health and wellness community, a $10,000 fine for them, or a fee, is a lot of money for them. They're not making nearly that much profit, especially on this product alone, if that is what it is. So really just trying to protect them as well, because this, again, is something that has been helping people with certain pain ailments, just to help them get through the day, that they're not paying an arm and a leg for out of pocket. So we just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention as well.
Great. Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, of course. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions?
Thank you.
And then lastly, too, we'll be in Woodbury tomorrow. We have numerous chiropractic accounts in Woodbury that brought up the point that Brock brought up. If they were to pay a $10,000 fee, they maybe make like wholesale-wise $1,000, $2,000 a month, really helping their elderly community, specifically with the chiropractors that reach out to us with RA, SA, sciatica, restless leg, people that are sick of taking the Western medicine with those side effects, and now they're not being able to go to their chiropractor or a health professional to get these products. So.
And I do have a couple follow-up questions for you. So there was some discussion, and some of the ordinance have language about no sampling allowed, or no samples being provided, free samples. And then second of all, consumption on the premises. If that is restricted, do you see that as an impediment to people in the health and wellness side of things being able to work with these products, or are they really providing the products for people to take home and use in their daily lives, and consumption on the premises isn't a big issue, or free samples not necessarily a big issue?
With regards to CBD products, CBD topicals, a lot of our products are used in practice, whether with regard to Graston or chiro or massage. With regards to THC products, we honestly weren't going to. Carpe Diem CBD is our Holisco CBD brand, and You Betcha Cannabis Company is our. See, I got some smiles out of you. Is our legal THC products, and the reason we came up with that name, we wanted to make it inviting and not a dark stigma over anything. And we're all Minnesotans, so we know what You Betcha means. But yeah, on-premise usage of THC, we do not suggest that because obviously the person has to get home too as well, and they're using it for that therapeutical benefit. CBD, the federal limit is 0.3 or less. We highly suggest you don't restrict that so health professionals can use CBD and not really lump in it's called full spectrum CBD. It has the full part of the plant with the legal limit of THC, which is 0.3, that cannot psychoactively get you high. We just pray and hope you don't lump that in with the 5 milligram beverages and gummies that you're opposing a fee for.
Right, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I do have a small printout just of things to consider while drafting ordinances that I can hand off to you guys later.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Feel free to give that to Mr. Trudgeon at the appropriate time. All right, is there anybody else from the public who wishes to speak? Hello and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Carol Moss. I'm an attorney at Helmuth & Johnson in Edina, and I represent numerous people with retailers and businesses within the cannabis industry. And I had the pleasure of being here in August, and I also submitted a correspondence with some concerns that I have. So I won't go through those concerns so much as try to answer your questions and concerns that you've already brought up. Regarding the sampling issue, the sampling and the coupons issue that you see sometimes in the language together in certain ordinances, that language comes specifically in city licensing ordinances that use tobacco as their framework. And the ban against sampling and coupons for tobacco was really based on a lot of data and studies that showed companies would use samples and coupons to specifically target and hook lower income communities. So that's where that ban comes from. How it relates to cannabis is a little bit different. I strongly encourage not to have a prohibition on coupons because as Carpe Diem could easily tell you, people react differently to different types of cannabinoids and different methods of consuming cannabinoids. And a lot of times people will try a couple of different methods to figure out, or different ratios or different cannabinoids to figure out what works for them. And some stores use deals or coupons in order to allow people to try different things to figure out what works for them. Also, these products, a lot of them are can go bad. They are perishable, and so sometimes the coupons are come into play when a product is about to go bad. So that's the background to that, Mayor Rowe. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Regarding the fee, and I can tell you, I have experience in dealing with Woodbury's very high fee. Their fee is, I think, like $10,600 or something very high, and it correlates with their on-site consumption of liquor license. I can also tell you that since they have passed their licensing ordinance, only 2 businesses have come forward to get the license, and many times that high fee is cited as a problem for smaller retail shops. So you're limiting to the THC licenses to the larger retail stores. Also, license fees are not to be seen as income for a city, but rather to cover costs. And so I do think that if that amount is outlandishly high, that there is some concern that it's challengeable, because that is in effect, and I think Councilmember Strawn mentioned it, that it could preclude people from getting it. It could be used as a de facto ban. And that's
And Ms.
not.
Moss, you've reached 3 minutes and 30
Oh.
seconds, so we're going to have to
Very
we're gonna have to
fast,
stop you there.
very fast. The testing, Councilmember Groff, Board of Pharmacy has a very active role in consistent that. And I also ask that you don't reduce the number of license, because as Carpe Diem has explained, there's chiropractors, there's tobacco shops, there's other places that are incorporating these products into their line. So with that, I am done with my 3 minutes. You let a lawyer talk, you get a lot. So I'd be happy to answer any questions later or follow up with Mr. Trudgeon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, we always know what we're getting into.
You and my husband.
Well, we have one of our own, so we know. All right. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? And once again, we do have the 2 microphones, so if you're prepared to speak and want to come up and be ready to go when the previous speaker is going, feel free to do that. Hello and welcome back.
Hi. Another thing I want to talk on that I didn't know about. Hi, I'm Elijah, 1293 Draper Avenue West. The one thing I wanted to suggest is kind of we're talking a lot about licensing fees, but I don't know if it would be possible for you guys to make a special tax for it. I know sometimes alcohol, that's how they do it with alcohol as well as tobacco. I think that if that's physically possible, that might be a better option than just charging a flat service fee, because once again, kind of what we're talking about here, small businesses and large businesses make a different amount. And so a large business that's getting a lot of customers might need more regulation and more to make sure that they're following the law, just more services versus, a small retailer that might have less products. So you have to do less testing, less, management, less surveillance, whatever it is. And so I think that maybe like a tax on the product might be a better option if that's possible. That's just what I was asking. I don't know if that's possible at all.
All right, thank you. We'll make sure and get you an answer on that. Anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item? And I forget, we do have folks online. Do we have hands raised?
We do not have hands raised from people.
We'll give folks a chance to do that in case they were prepared to speak but hadn't seen that their opportunity was coming up.
Nothing yet.
Okay. Anyone else here in the chambers who wishes to speak to this item? All right. Double checking remote participants.
No.
All right. Going once, going twice. We'll go ahead and close the opportunity for public comment. And thank you, everyone, and everyone who's weighed in prior to the meeting via emails and other information as well. Council, some thoughts. I did want to answer, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Attorney, state law does not give cities generally permission to tax items anyway, and specifically, I don't believe the state law related to these products provides for cities to do taxes. That doesn't mean that they're exempt from state sales tax or those types of things, but no city taxation capabilities.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Other thoughts from council members, direction as far as what we want to see? I think Ms. Moss raised an interesting point about Woodbury. It'd be interesting to look at their ordinance and see if they have separate tiers for on-site consumption versus simply a sale transaction like an off-sale liquor equivalent or tobacco sales. It'd be interesting to understand that better. Any thoughts from council members as to how we might want to proceed? Councilmember Strawn?
I shared this last time, and I continue to have, believe that we should put these items in our age-restricted tobacco shops. Many of the items are more flavored and would be more like a tobacco item. Then we know that they're not adding a burden to our police enforcement. There are places that would be enforced already. We have 4 already in place, and I would think that there wouldn't be an excessive amount of additional license fee necessary when we've already taken a background check on them. I think this would be wise, as we're still waiting for that year of the legislature to tell us more what they meant to say last time, when we don't know, rather than creating a whole new structure of entities where they could. I'm very opposed to the possibility of coupons. I don't think it would be any different to try to hook poor folks on previous items as there would be now. And I think it's poor practice. We don't allow, there's not coupons on liquor. And again, as far as in-place sampling or on-site consumption, doesn't sound like. And my understanding is right now we're working to regulate THC and not other products. And so that's what I have in mind with this. I don't think we need to be onerous in our licensing fees if we were able to keep these locations as is. And 4 spots right now would help move us forward with options, but it helps us also buy some time while we try to figure out what the state is going to do with their plans moving forward.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts from council members? Councilmember Graff?
Well, it was interesting hearing about the wellness, health and wellness side of it, because I think if we limited it to 4 spots, none of those groups would be able to sell this. So that would eliminate anyone who uses chiropractic in their chiropractic or practice or other types like. So I think that has to be considered.
Right, other thoughts from council members? Thought I saw, yeah, Councilmember.
Before we go there, maybe we need to ask them again, but are we being asked to look at chiropractic and other medical providers as part of this?
No, not exactly. We're looking regarding the sale of these products by consumer in a retail type of setting. So I would walk in and purchase it and leave.
Okay.
Versus as part of a medical practice, as part of either a prescription or treatment on site.
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
We may want to be explicit about that in whatever ordinance
Yes.
we might adopt.
Yeah.
Yes. So going beyond that, I would agree partially with Ms. Strawn on the 4 age-restricted tobacco retailers. I think that makes sense and makes it easier, but I'm not opposed to standalone commercial business locations with the restrictions around not being mobile. I think that's reasonable for this. I would absolutely support that there are no samples or consumption on the premises. I think the licensing fee matching tobacco makes sense. It's the same kind of age thing. I wonder if that fee is high enough in general, considering we've heard several times from staff in the last year or so that they're struggling to keep up, and that we need to maybe make that enough so that we can hire the additional staff or the overtime needed for police officers to complete that work. So that's something for our fee schedule, I guess, in the next month or so here. So I would tag it with the tobacco stores, but I would suggest that maybe it's not high enough if we continue to struggle to get to all that, and making sure we can pay folks to get that work done.
Just to clarify, are you saying to limit the sales to only the 4 age-restricted tobacco stores?
Or standalone 21-only establishments.
Oh, for this product?
Yes.
Okay, that's I wanted to understand, because obviously that's different. Okay, thank you.
Versus grocery stores or things like that. Yes.
Councilmember Strawn,
I'd just like to make sure as well, in that standalone, that we have a limit, as we did not have a limit on our massage therapies, and that went crazy. And our police department is appreciative that we have a limit, and we wish we would have set it lower. I think we need to start with a modest number, and if we are able to accommodate that, we can always go up. But I think, that's why I really think 4 might be a good place to start. But I just think we can't leave it open-ended, because our folks with all these liquor and tobacco license issues, I think we have too many places right now for our police department to attend.
All right, other thoughts from council members? I guess I would say that I think it would be appropriate to have language that allows the sale at our dedicated 21 over tobacco stores. I think allowing the sale at 21 and over THC product stores may make some sense. I would maybe think that a total number of licenses in the neighborhood of 10 is a good starting point. I would be interested to look at, I am concerned about sale at convenience stores and grocery stores and things like that. I think that what we've seen with compliance checks and with the ability to do adequate ID checks and things like that, those are the establishments that tend to have the most difficulty because they have turnover. It's not the only product they sell. They're not dedicated to 21 and over type sales. So I'm not sure I want to open it up to those types of businesses, but I do also want to provide the opportunity for sort of dedicated THC type stores. And there may be a way, and maybe I saw it in one of the ordinances in the packet, to look at sort of revenue numbers and say, there may be some percentage of your revenue that either has to be these products or no more than can be these products, or something along those lines. Like I said, I thought I saw that, but I'm not sure where it was, so I'd have to do some checking on that. But I think that makes sense. I don't want to just limit it to our 4 tobacco-only stores because, A, those stores are sunsetted, so there aren't always going to be 4. And second of all, I think this is a business model that we want to allow to people to try and to see how it fits in the marketplace. I know we've heard from people who use or would use these products, and I think do use these products for purposes of their health and their well-being, and I think we definitely don't want to make it excessively restrictive for folks to be able to purchase those products locally. Certainly, the online option is always there. Nothing we can do about that. We don't propose to regulate that with our ordinance. This is specifically bricks and mortar type establishments. So I think we're on a track that makes sense. I agree with following the parallel with the tobacco in terms of not having, mobile type, movable type establishments, kiosks, that sort of thing. I think that it makes sense to not allow consumption on the premises. I think that's important. I liked the purpose language in the Golden Valley ordinance. I thought that was thorough and clear. I think that our tobacco ordinance could otherwise be sort of our starting point for our ordinance, because I like our penalty structure and our language about those types of things as it relates to tobacco. And so I think we can work from that. I agree with not, permitting sales through vending machines and those sorts of things, which we have in our tobacco ordinance as well. Self-service not allowed, those types of things. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming down. I think from the point of view of fees, unless consumption is allowed on the premises, I think that our fees should be pretty much in line with our off-sale liquor and tobacco license fees. And once again, if we need to look at all of those and make sure that they're appropriately covering our costs, I think that's appropriate. I think the $300 background check separate fee is a pretty significant cost, and that's associated specifically with our cost to do the background check. So I think that's a part of the picture that has to be there. I think those are my main thoughts as I was looking at all this, and I think it's in line pretty much with largely with what I've been hearing from most of the council anyway. But obviously, I think my 10 number might have been a little higher than other people's, so I'm certainly willing to listen to other thoughts, and certainly we can have a draft ordinance come to us, and we can work through what we think is most appropriate at that point, too. So, other thoughts from council members? Does staff feel you've got pretty good guidance?
Yeah, unless there's other input, I saw a lot of consistent language around making sure that this would be allowed in places that restricted entrance to 21 or older, which would include our age-restricted tobacco shops and maybe freestanding THC stores. No samples being given at all. Have a fee that's appropriate to the work that we need to do, but certainly closer to the tobacco and off-sale liquor. also follow the model of the tobacco ordinance, at least in some of the standards, as well as the administrative fees. So, yeah, I think that's really guidance that we can start putting language together in an ordinance and bring that forward. We have a few meetings left this year. I think we would want to bring that forward before the end of the year, so we will endeavor towards doing that. And once we have a draft language, we do have to post that 10 days prior to consideration, so that will be public. I will also note that I will continue to stay in touch with people that are interested in following this to make sure that they see that and have ample time to review it, and certainly welcome them to come and comment at the appropriate time. So I think we have the direction.
Right, and I just want to be clear, too, about the no consumption on the premises and the storage of the products behind a counter or otherwise not freely accessible to customers.
So just with that, I think with the age-restricted tobacco, we did not require that because only persons
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
over 21 had to be in there. If you allowed it in places that it allowed people under, then you would want to make sure.
Got it, okay.
That
That's a
point
good
was brought
point.
up
Thank you
earlier
for
as well.
clarifying.
Yep.
All right, Councilmember Groff.
The only thing I was wondering if you need a little more clarification on the number, since we had 4 and 10, there's a big gap there. Anyone
I can
have-
leave that blank, and you guys can talk about
Okay,
it that night,
okay,
or
that's fine.
That is a way to do it. We'll have hopefully more council members there who aren't able to participate tonight, too, so we can work from a blank and come up with how to fill it. All right, anything else from the council? All right, thank you, and thanks once again to folks from the public who are participating in this process and who will, I'm sure, remain engaged. And if we do have questions, we'll make sure and follow up. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us then to consider an ordinance amending Title V regarding the possession of catalytic converters. And I believe, Mr. Trudgeon, are you introducing this item?
Just real briefly, this item was brought forward initially by Councilmember Strawn, modeled after the Bloomington ordinance. So what you see in front of you is the Bloomington ordinance, I think inexact from what they ended up passing. I did note in the case there are several other cities that have also passed very similar, if not identical, regulations regarding the possession of a catalytic converter, that there would need to be proof shown by the person possessing them that that is their catalytic converter. So that's all I have for introductory. Councilmember Strawn might have additional thoughts on
Sure,
it.
Councilmember Strawn.
Thank you. Just to reiterate what I mentioned last time we talked on this, I had spoken with I had connected with the chief, who indicated it would be a useful tool and just one of many tools. We realize that this is not the only method. We really need a more widespread decision at the state level, but barring that, providing one more option if officers were to find someone with a unattached or a car full of unattached catalytic converters, some recourse, because right now there's little they can do. And then, of course, like I said, it just as many things as most of life, it disproportionately affects the poor, who are more likely to have maybe an older model car that has a catalytic converter, or the lack of a garage to place that vehicle in. And according to the repair shop, more and more challenges to have getting these pieces, getting the parts, waiting 3 months, having no access to a vehicle. And so just trying to provide another option and join the other cities who've moving forward. And even since this came out, I saw 2 more cities over the weekend moving forward. So if this is our small way to move the state forward in making a decision, I think it would be helpful. And I think it would be a useful, one of many tools in the police officer's tool bag.
Thank you, Councilmember Strawn. Are there questions for staff in relation to this possession ordinance proposal? Councilmember Ratten.
Our attorney brought up some concerns last time. I'm wondering if you have any further thoughts, Mr. Goggin, or if the city has contacted League of Minnesota Cities for any guidance, whether legal or otherwise, on these types of ordinances.
Mayor, Council, yeah, it's true that I have some personal questions about an ordinance of this nature, and it arises out of, within criminal law, persons are afforded pretty significant constitutional due process rights under both Minnesota's Constitution and the federal Constitution. They arise from several different amendments to those constitutions, which are identical. For example, Fourth Amendment right against search and seizure, that's a warrant requirement. Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination and the right to remain silent. Sixth Amendment right to counsel. The 14th Amendment right to a fair proceeding, due process, all of which over the years has been developed for overall due process rights for a presumption of innocence and the issue of burden of proof remaining with the government in terms of proving unlawful activity. So when you have an ordinance like this where we say you can't possess this otherwise lawful item unless you tell us if it's yours, I just have some questions as to whether or not an ordinance like that would withstand constitutional scrutiny over whether it impermissibly shifts the burden of proof onto individuals to prove their innocence to the government as opposed to the other way around. That's not to say I'm here to get in the way of this or anything like that. It's just something to be aware of. I think it's something for all cities to be aware of when they pass ordinances like this, that this is an issue that's going to require, I think, larger measures from folks above our pay grades at the state level, and that this local level ordinances, I think, very well could, not tomorrow, but in a matter of months or years, be found to not be something that's in our toolbox anymore. Just a point of information from my perspective, if my opinion is asked what I think of an ordinance like this. I think it's got some vulnerabilities in terms of whether it's going to be around for the long haul or not.
Thank you.
If I may follow up on that, it'd be fair to say probably that even if the state adopted a similar statute in regard to possession, it would be likely subject to the same sort of scrutiny related to constitutional.
Exactly, and when I talk about statewide efforts, I'm not talking about a state law adopting this sort of provision within state criminal code. I'm talking about more licensing of scrap dealers and what items they can accept and under what circumstances. That gets it outside of the criminal law realm, and there's far more leeway for governmental action on those sorts of matters. And then, of course, we're all aware of efforts to mark catalytic converters, and that could certainly be something that a state can enact in terms of what must be done for new cars sold in the state. And, of course, funding for marking of older cars could be a statewide effort as well. So that's what I'm talking about. When from my perspective, addressing this issue is going to take something far more, I think, than an ordinance like this.
Right, and Councilmember Groff.
So, worst case scenario, we did pass this ordinance. The police were able to stop 50 different people with catalytic converters. Most of them said, yeah, okay, blah, 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 I'm fine. And then the 51st one has someone bigger behind them, and they actually go to court, and this would be ruled not allowable. That wouldn't go back and affect the 50 that had already
No,
processed.
Mayor, Council, no, that if this council passed an ordinance like this, I could, in very good conscience, prosecute these cases unless and until the court determines that this is not a constitutional ordinance. And I would do so, like many laws have been struck down as unconstitutional years after the fact, after their passing.
One more question.
Sure.
So it would still be possibly out in the public as a deterrent where people would say, don't go to Roseville and cut out catalytic converters because they actually have an ordinance.
It's true that the ordinance would be out there to be used. In my experience as 20 years as a prosecutor, I'm not certain that's how people would behave. But
The logic is necessary.
But the ordinance would be effective upon adoption, and the city could prosecute circumstances of folks found with catalytic converters who can't prove their innocence.
What's the penalty structure under the city ordinance.
This would be a misdemeanor, which carries with it a maximum penalty of 90 days in jail and a $1,000 fine.
So it's not like a $100 ticket or something like that.
No, that's the maximum, however.
Right.
We can expect the overwhelming majority of these cases, I would expect, would be defendants who are public defender eligible, which would suggest that they are of lesser financial means. And so fines are not going to be $1,000 for this sort of activity.
But they
Councilmember
also increase with repeated offenses usually, don't they?
Only if a law has a specific enhancement provision to it, which this does not.
No.
However, a person's prior criminal history is taken into account in terms of disposition.
So if somebody received a lower fine and/or sentence as a result of prosecution at one time.
And if they
and
came
they're-
back,
Came back a second time, that
every
could be
prosecutor-
closer to the max.
That's correct, Mayor and Council. Every prosecutor in our office takes into consideration prior criminal record with regard to appropriate dispositions.
I did have a question about sort of what happens now if somebody happens to be pulled, say somebody is pulled over for a moving violation, they went through a red light or something like that, and the officer observes detached catalytic converters in the vehicle and perhaps a Sawzall, a well-used Sawzall. Sort of what is the process without this ordinance in effect, and what changes with this ordinance in effect? If you could just, either you and/or representatives of the police department.
I always defer to the chief.
Maybe starting with the police side and then the prosecution side.
Policy.
Good evening. So I'll try to answer that. If an officer stops a vehicle that we believe is involved in catalytic converter thefts, we're going to try to build a stronger case. Whether if they've got a Sawzall in there, we might be able to prove possession of burglary tools, which is a felony. We're going to try to do some tracking in that vehicle, whether it's putting on a tracking device, maybe applying for search warrants to get additional records. We want to build more than just a misdemeanor case, because what we found is if all you're doing is issuing them a citation, even under this ordinance, if that's all we do, a lot of the people will probably go on and continue to commit these crimes. So we really want to look at bringing serious charges, and that's why we were really hopeful that the state would have passed more meaningful legislation in the last few years. But there are a handful of cases each year where we just have nothing. We don't have enough for a Sawzall to prove that it's been involved in developed that felony, and so we're left with somebody who has 2 or 3 catalytic converters, and that's all we've got. Right now, we don't have anything. They basically go free. We do try to make sure that we're passing on that intel to other agencies and working with the state, because we know these people that are doing these cases are very active. They're usually out repeatedly, night after night, doing these thefts, and that's why we want to make sure we've got serious consequences. Unfortunately, at the state level, that didn't happen, so here we are looking for additional tools.
Great, thank you, Chief. And I don't know, from a prosecuting point of view, if you have anything to add.
I would simply add, Mayor and Council, that right here tonight, it is illegal to possess someone else's catalytic converter without their consent. It is illegal to steal someone's catalytic converter right now, tonight. This doesn't change that. What this ordinance does is addresses the issue of proving it, which occurs in, I would say in my experience, Roseville police officers pull over many cars with items in the back seat or the trunk that we know doesn't belong to that person. But we have to prove that. We don't say you can't have bags of clothes in your back seat until you can prove to us you bought it at JCPenney. But this, so you can kind of see that distinction here. So what would happen if this passes, it would go into the court system like any other theft-related case. We prosecute hundreds, if not thousands, of those on behalf of Roseville every year already. And so all that would change is this, all that would change would, there would be an opportunity afforded. Can you prove that you're supposed to be in possession of this item? I can tell you that I would expect there to be some legal challenge to any attorney who's representing someone facing a charge like this. I don't think it'd be all that common for a case like this to come around. I think shoplifting from Walmart or elsewhere is still going to be the lion's share of our work when it comes to theft-related matters here and elsewhere. But it would be something to just be aware of, and I would caution against victory laps about where we've solved this issue because of this ordinance.
Thank you. And so if there's a well-developed case, that's the basis on which you would probably go forward. Maybe this would be added to that, but probably more likely this would be come into play where there isn't as much of a substantial case elsewise, and this becomes sort of the only thing left we have.
Yeah.
Is that a good understanding of it?
Absolutely. And if a car full of catalytic converters was found by Roseville police officers, the first step would be investigate. Did we just have a neighborhood hit with a bunch of catalytic converter thefts? And that would, most likely, if we could connect those dots, result in a fairly significant felony theft case, because theft cases, the level of severity is determined by the value of the items taken. And we know catalytic converters are stolen for one reason and one reason only. They've got significant value. And so there would, in a circumstance like that, there would be a surefire felony case if we could connect back. Which gets back to kind of this, one of the problems is these catalytic converters aren't marked. We can't place them with particular cars.
No, we'll have to match them to the
which makes
vehicle.
that A to B to C difficult. And so it'd be kind of nice if there was regulations in place for those items to be serial marked. But
So, and just one final follow-up, and then obviously if I've been hogging it and other people have other questions, at the moment that a question arises as to the ownership of the catalytic converters, does the individual have a certain amount of time within which to provide proof of ownership? Does it have to be at the moment of the stop? Is there a 24-hour follow-up? Or, I mean, just kind of understanding how that would work, and I don't know, once again, if that's the chief or the attorney.
well, I would say first, this ordinance does not provide any sort of timeline for that. I can say it would be routine practice. I would expect for folks, if they were in fact in lawful possession and had proof of that, that would be exculpatory evidence at any point in time. And so our office would, I would imagine, not prosecute someone who was in lawful possession of, whether we determine that on the night of the stop or the morning of trial, we would take appropriate action.
Got it. All right, thank you. Right, any other questions? All right. Councilmember Strawn.
I'd just like to mention that if you decide that we're not doing it, it does send a message to the public that I'm not sure we want to send.
I don't know that anybody has decided not to do this at this point.
I don't know either. I'm just
Right,
sharing.
that's why we have a council discussion and a vote. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your input. Anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this proposed ordinance? Anyone participating remotely online at this point?
There is no one left.
Okay, they were here for another item. All right.
It's dwindling.
All right, we wore them down. All right, well, thank you again. Though we don't have anybody, thanks for staff and our attorney and chief weighing in. All right, council consideration. We have the proposed ordinance before us. Is there any other questions or things we need to concern ourselves with, or is there a motion related to the ordinance?
I make a motion to approve the ordinance as presented.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Groff, to approve the ordinance as presented. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn.
Nothing further.
Okay, Councilmember Groff.
No, I think we've talked through it.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Bratton.
I think I'm going to support this because this is a raging problem that's affecting a lot of people. I am concerned about the potential legal problems. I am also concerned about some of the attorney brought up later when saying, we don't have a similar law around if you have someone's TV in your backseat. So I'm not sure how all that works out. but it is a thing that is hitting us in an unusual way, and if we can help maybe even with some of these investigations over time as we catching people, so I will support it with hesitation.
All right. I would just concur, with that. I think that to me, it's not necessarily appropriate to oppose a proposal like this simply on the basis of potential concern for constitutionality. We are not necessarily, let me take a step back from that. There are certain times when it is very clear that we do not want to enact an ordinance based on the threat of its constitutionality, especially if it's an ordinance that significantly infringes upon individual rights such as free speech or those sorts of things. I think that this is an area where there's enough question about it, and I think there's enough concern as to what's going on in our community that I can support the ordinance, fully aware of all those potentials down the road. And hopefully, it can make a difference. I do share the concern about that we don't have a similar ordinance for car stereos and a similar ordinance for merchandise from clothing stores and things like that. But I think we understand the sort of point of the sword, so to speak, related to catalytic converters right now is an issue, and I think this provides us the ability to address that, so I'm supportive. With that, we've got the motion before us to adopt the ordinance as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you again to everybody who's involved in this and folks that weighed in from the public, certainly offline. With that, then, we have another ordinance proposal this evening, which is an ordinance pertaining to tenant notification. This one also, because it's a lengthy ordinance, has a requested ordinance summary, but we'll get to that at the appropriate time. We'll turn it over to Janice Gunlock, our Community Development Director, to bring this back before us. This is something that we did have before us at a previous meeting, and so this is a chance to hopefully kind of finalize our conversations and move forward.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yes, we did last talk about this item last Monday. During that discussion, the council did request some minor revisions, mostly to emphasize and clarify that this ordinance would only apply to licensed multifamily housing buildings of 5 or more units. So we did make some minor changes to the ordinance. We've amended the title, and we've made sure the purpose statement emphasizes that these are licensed buildings of 5 or more units. I also want to note, since that last meeting, just today, we received a letter from the Minnesota Multifamily Housing Association. I believe that was forwarded to the council. I know I forwarded it. You may have received it directly from them. I just wanted to make one comment about the content of that letter. There was a comment made that the city doesn't have the resources or the opportunities to intervene to maintain affordability. This is in response to the pre-sale notice requirement. And I would just like to say that the city does have resources and staff that we devote to those efforts, and we have demonstrated in the past the ability to do that. And so I just wanted to make sure that the council understood that. Without the pre-sale notice requirement, it's very likely that a NOAA building could go up for sale, sell, close before we even know about it, which right now that doesn't present any opportunity to try and maintain affordability. And I also want to clarify, the pre-sale notice requirement does not require somebody to work with the city to maintain affordability, but it does provide the time and the opportunity to talk about it and negotiate it. So without that pre-sale notice requirement, that's not going to be possible. And so I just wanted to make sure there was a common understanding around that. One other comment I wanted to make is Councilmember Atten had emailed me a bunch of questions, and one of the items he brought up I did want to talk about because I think there's an opportunity to make a small adjustment to the ordinance, and I know we didn't get a chance to talk via phone.
You're fine.
And I noted in my email response to you I'd look into this. It's related to the penalties section. Right now, at the end of the ordinance, we talk about penalties for not complying with the tenant notification period and the relocation amounts, but we don't call out the pre-sale notice requirement under the penalties section. Part of it, I think, is on purpose, because if they haven't complied with that section, all we're really doing is charging them a fee to, and it doesn't take away the fact that they didn't comply with the pre-sale notice requirement. But our existing city code already says that if you do not comply with any section of the ordinance, you're subject to a misdemeanor criminal citation. So I think but the way that first sentence is written in that section, it's not totally clear that we could utilize that provision in the city code. So I would like to suggest to address that comment and to maintain an ability to impose a penalty upon a multifamily owner who did not comply with the pre-sale notice requirement. That lines 174 and 175, the first section, the first sentence under the violations paragraph of section 910.07, it be reworded to say, a violation of this chapter is subject to any penalties provided for in chapter 102 of the city code. And then that second sentence, we would want to change title 1 to chapter 102. So again, that's just referencing the existing code language that says a violation of any part of our city code is subject to a misdemeanor citation. Other than that minor change, assuming the council is comfortable with it, we are recommending that you adopt both ordinances. The summary publication obviously requires a supermajority, whereas the ordinance itself only requires a 3/5 vote. That's all I have.
Right, questions or, questions for staff, I guess, is our next step here. Councilmember Etten.
Ms. Gunlock, thank you for your email, and yeah, we all had work and we didn't connect. I apologize for that myself. The other area that I had some questions around was the 910.03. A couple pieces here. The first one, I wonder if you can clarify, I think you mentioned in your email, if I was understanding correctly, that there is a separate type of notice here for, that went to the city versus that went to the people who are affected in the units. Is that accurate?
So, are you talking about the pre-sale notice requirement? So the pre-sale notice requirement, the ordinance specifies what the owner has to communicate to the city.
Yep.
But later on in that section, it also says that the notice has to be mailed or hand-delivered to the tenants as well. So they could presumably provide almost an identical notice, except for the fact that the ordinance has a couple of sentences that have to be included in that notification. And those sentences have to be provided in English, Spanish, Somali, Karen, and Hmong as well. So they'll be slightly different, but communicating the exact same information to both the city and the tenants. So if you add up the amount of time that the tenants get for the pre-sale notice, plus the amount of time they get once the tenant notification goes into effect, it ends up being a lot more than 3 months. It ends up being almost 6 months.
Okay. That's helpful. I'm wondering if that should be called out differently here in the 03 as a notice to the city, and then under A, it gives what should be in that essentially. B talks about manner and timing of the notice, but doesn't talk about a separate, it does talk about a separate thing, but it sounds like it's all part of the same notice requirement. So whether we need A to include all affected tenants at that time, but A and B don't seem to talk equally to each other. They mention notices, but you're saying they're different or could be different, and in this sense, B seems to be talking about A, but yet it adds in the all tenants part.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, the pre-sale, the intent of the ordinance is for the tenants and the city to get notice before it gets put up for sale. I did note in my response to you that I'm not sure that there's a need to reword the language in this section, especially given we're following the Housing Justice Center's template ordinance, but it maybe makes sense to clarify in the title of section 910-03 that there is,
You could just add notice to the city and tenants
yeah.
of proposed sale.
Yep. And we could also include of an affordable housing building, because
Right.
that pre-sale notice
For that whole
requirement only
title.
applies to the affordable housing buildings, not to everything else. So it could
Yes.
say notice to the city and tenants of proposed sale of an affordable housing building. It's a long title, but it captures everything. I
And
think.
then it captures what's in there. Yeah, I would
We could
appreciate
make
that. And I think that all we'd have to do in A in line 69 to 70 is shall notify the community development director, fire chief, and all affected tenants of the proposed sale. Could we not just add "and all affected tenants" to 69 going to 70? So then A and B speak to each other more clearly?
The only comment I would have there is lines 73 through 78 specify specific information that needs to be provided to the city on the pre-sale notice requirement, and that information may not really make sense or be applicable to be given to the tenants themselves in terms of like the total number of dwelling units, the type and number of those units in terms of efficiency versus one bedroom or two bedroom. The actual notice that the tenants get is more general in nature, that just says it's being put up for sale. This is important information about your housing. If you don't understand it, have someone translate it for you now or request a translation from your landlord. If you aren't, I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt to give the tenants the same information that the city is receiving, but I think that's why the two sections are different.
Sure. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk.
I know.
And I'm sorry I'm taking so much time. But then for me, B should be directly about the notice to affected tenants. And we should put the timing piece into A, notice to the city and delivered to the community development director and fire chief for 90 days prior for this type of sale. And then B should be a separate heading for notice to all affected tenants, and then describes the language that starts essentially at 81, line 81 through 87.
Another way you could do it potentially is that under B, this theoretically would be fewer changes, but we'll see. The notice on line, and I apologize, the line numbers may not be the same. So on the third line of B, where it begins, a few words in, it says, "The notice shall also be delivered." You could say the notice including items A, 1 and 2 of A, and the fact of the sale, or proposed sale. And then just continue from there. Oops, I keep writing on top of buttons on my laptop. It's all right. Does that make sense, maybe as a way to address that? So we're saying at least you give them the owner's name and address, whatever, the address of the building. Obviously, they know their address, so I'm not sure 2 needs to be in there. And then, the fact of the sale, and then the rest. And that clarifies the notice to the tenant then in B, without adding a lot of stuff to both of those. Because I think A is talking about notice, and B is talking about the manner and timing. So,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, if I may.
Go ahead.
I might suggest on line 79, where it starts with B, manner and timing of notice. If we deleted that, B, manner and time of notice, leaving that first sentence, the notice shall be mailed, as just under A. So that, because that,
So 79 through,
79 through the for sale on 81.
yep,
So that is just the ending of A.
yes,
And then we have B, notice to affected tenant.
yes,
ooh, that works.
And that would just include everything following that.
yes.
That's even better. Okay.
And with the obvious formatting where B would be indented from.
yep, I
So B,
understand.
All right. Any other questions for staff?
No.
Just maybe for for Ms. Gunlock. So we require the 60-day notice. 60-day notice? 60-day notice. 90-day notice, thank you. And that doesn't mean that we're holding up a sale for 90 days necessarily, because somewhere before 90 days, we could determine that, you know, the city doesn't have any interest in maintaining the affordability or ability to, and the parties can then proceed as they wish. I mean, now granted, their plan is to do it at, you know, at the end of 90 days, but, you know, I guess the point to sort of counter the argument that we're holding up sales is that, you know, actually, once we determine what we want to do, if we don't do anything, they can certainly proceed in any way they want.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I mean, we're not interested in holding up sales if it's clear to us that there's no opportunity or negotiation to be gotten to preserve affordability.
And then at that point, if the sale happens, then the notice to tenants of the sale and all their rights after that then begins.
Yep,
And that's still the same time period.
that's correct.
Councilmember Atten?
I think we all agree on this. I think you had mentioned, Ms. Gunlock, that this is simply a notice to the city. It's not a legal pausing of the sale. Is that correct? We're not legally pausing. We're saying, hey, let us know, and then maybe we have the opportunity to interject and save affordable housing.
Mr. Goggin?
It's a pause to the extent it requires
Notice.
advance notice.
Yeah.
So a property owner intending to sell next week wouldn't necessarily be
Fair
able to do
enough.
that.
Okay.
They would have to provide 90 days notice. Or in a circumstance where staff learns information of a pending sale and the notice had not been
Yep.
given,
Okay.
we could invoke our city code penalty provisions to hold up the sale pending that 90 days.
Okay. Fair enough.
So in that context, on that layer,
Yeah.
there could be a holdup.
Yep. Okay.
Councilmember Strawn?
Just clarifying, so if someone is, only people who are in affordable housing are afforded the potential 90 days of protection of the notice of sale. So only people deemed 80% AMI or whatever we've deemed as our threshold.
No, this only speaks to the pre-sale notice requirement. So the pre-sale notice requirement only applies to buildings that meet the definition of affordable housing. The 3-month tenant notification period applies to all units.
Okay, so even if we decide we are not able to keep it affordable, we are not shortening that amount of time that the people have the pre-sale notification.
Post.
No,
Post-sale.
post-sale. The
Post-
tenant
okay.
notification is the post-sale, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's a very good point to clarify that. So 910.04, the post-sale notice applies to all buildings in
Yes.
Roseville,
Right.
5 units or more.
I would clarify, we probably have less than a handful of buildings that,
Granted, yes,
Yep.
yes, exactly.
Mayor.
Councilmember Grau?
Just thinking most of the time these sales take longer than that. I think the main thing is to be communicating with the landlord or the owners of these properties so that they know, and I'm sure we have some plan to do that, correct? That this new ordinance is in effect, or if it does go into effect.
we do plan to work with the fire department to put some notices on the rental license application, which they have to complete every year, just to make sure we put them on notice. We obviously went out of our way to notify them of this ordinance process. We invited them to meetings, so I'm having a hard time understanding how they wouldn't know. But, you know, staff is always available to talk with landlords about these ordinances, and we obviously would do that.
Well, they've had opportunity then, so as long as you let them know this is coming up.
All right. Question, any other additional questions for staff? Otherwise, we do want to provide an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this proposed ordinance requiring 2 types of notification? One is a pre-sale notification to the city and tenants 90 days prior to the sale, and the second is post-sale notification of tenants of certain responsibilities and limitations after the sale. Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? We're kind of running out of items, so hopefully this is the one that you came to speak for.
This is the one I came
All
to
right.
speak on, so
Welcome back.
you won't have to hear from me anymore. Hi, my name is Elijah. I live at 1293 Draper Avenue West. And I just wanted to come out and say I really support this. I know kind of, forget your name, but whoever just spoke really, thank you so much, Ms. Gunlock. You really talked a lot about kind of what I was thinking and what I was talking about. I really think that this is really something that's very important that we do for tenants. I have some friends who are renters. I'm a renter myself. I'm not in a multifamily unit, but I am in a single family, home. And, imagine, just, being kicked out of your home with, a month's notice, not knowing where you can go. If people work a 9-to-5 job, a lot of these places where people would go to tour these facilities or see these facilities are only open 9 to 5 during the weekdays. If you have kids that you're watching after school, it's really hard for you to find an apartment in even a month's time. And so by adding this, extra time, you allow for people to actually have an opportunity to, find a new place to live if the rent is increased, as well as, you make sure that there's clear communication, because I think sometimes there really isn't between the property owners and the tenants. So I really support this. I really hope that it passes, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being here this evening. All right, is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item? All right, and nobody online still?
Nope.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the opportunity for public comment. I did want to just note that it may make sense at the beginning of 91004 just to be extra clear that it does apply to all housing buildings,
Oh, yes.
because I think that can be a little bit confusing as people read through it. I don't know if folks have an idea. I mean, my first thought was in the first line of A under 91004, just to change the word A to any, so whenever the title to property containing any housing building, which is defined in the code, is conveyed, then this goes into effect. I don't know if that gets at it enough or makes it clear enough for people.
That's fine.
All right.
It's any over 5 units, correct?
Right,
Yes.
that's, the housing building is defined in the code as a building with 5 or more
Yeah.
rental units. Right. Councilmember Adden.
I would move approval of this ordinance, including the changes to the title of 03, line 6970 of that, and the changes around the manner and timing 79 through 83, as well as then the mayor's comments about line 97, putting in the word any instead of a, containing any housing building.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Groff to adopt the ordinance with the amendments.
Pause.
Pause.
Are we including the changes to the penalty
That's-
section?
I'm sorry, I just flipped the page. And the changes to the penalty section under 07, line 174, as suggested by Ms. Gundlach.
All right.
Thank
And I
you.
believe there was another line where Title I was changed to Chapter 102 further down in that paragraph.
Yes,
All right.
that too. Thank you.
Everyone clear on the the motion and the ordinance we're moving here? All right, I want to be sure of that. Discussion on the motion, maker of the motion, Councilmember Etten.
I think this is a good and reasonable step to help potentially preserve naturally affordable housing, as well as giving any of our renters notice as their lease or their charges or their tenancy may change.
All right, seconder, Councilmember Groff.
Yes, I would agree with that, and thank you, Ms. Gunlock, for all the work on this, because this was a detailed,
For many months.
many months of work, and it's accomplishing what we had talked about, and I appreciate that.
Councilmember Strawn.
I just want to echo those sentiments. This was quite the undertaking to do the community engagement and the pizza events and opportunities for people to gather. Maybe not quite as many people as we had hoped, but I think it speaks well to our interest in authentic participation, and hopefully it's a model that we use to move forward on other issues as well.
Great, thank you. And, excuse me, I would just add that I know some of the feedback we had gotten from one advocacy person had indicated that this, wasn't maybe as needed as a tenant eviction notification ordinance, which is not at all part of what we've been discussing up to this point. Excuse me. And, I would say that may be the case in the world that person is working in, but I think Roseville is unique in that we have so much rental housing in our community of such an age that it already, just the market rates are in those affordable categories to a great extent. And so anytime we see the potential for the sale of one of those properties without certain protections in it, and we've actually seen examples of this in Roseville already, not recently, but a few years back when I think it was the Centennial Gardens apartments sold, and tenants were unclear about what was going on, and rents were changing a lot. Now, they were also remodeling, so there was a whole lot of moving people back and forth, but I remember looking through tables and tables of rents and past, history of rents and things like that related to the affordability. So the ability to know that we have an opportunity to intervene in a sale, in a potential sale situation, to preserve affordability, I think is very important. And so I think that is something we want to do, and I think that while it may not be recognized that way by others, I think we all recognize the importance in the city of Roseville. So I'm supportive of the ordinance. With that, and I would echo all the thanks for all the outreach that's been done on it and the intentional nature of it and following our newer practices and putting them to the test. With that, we have the motion before us. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Councilmember Atten, as to the summary.
Oh, I'd like to move the ordinance summary. Like, what? I'll second
You didn't
that.
know that? Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Sorry, we didn't get consistency between the two motions. That's all
Well,
right.
he had second. Yes.
All right, with that, we have the motion before us to adopt an ordinance summary. This allows us to publish a shortened version so that we can save on the cost of publication, but it provides notice to people as to where to see the whole text of the ordinance. This does require a supermajority vote, which in the case of a 5-member council is 4 members. All those in favor of the motion to adopt the summary signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That does pass, meeting the supermajority requirement, and so we will publish a summary. Thank you again to everyone. I do want to just note, just in light of, this got like, I had to sit back down again. In light of the comments about the tenant eviction notice, I think that might be a topic to bring back perhaps to the EDA and/or the council at a future meeting for some discussion as to whether we might want to look at that. Because I just don't know enough about it right now to say, yes or no. And I think being that it was brought up by an advocate, we should look at that. So didn't want to lose track of that. Thanks again, everyone. And with that, that brings us to item 9A, which is consideration of council minutes. We have minutes from our October 10th, 2022 meeting as presented. Do we have any changes or corrections or a motion to approve as presented?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Etten to approve those minutes from October 10th. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0, and those minutes are approved. That then brings us to consideration of the consent agenda. We had no items removed, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Trudgeon to introduce our consent agenda items this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a fairly short consent agenda tonight. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $2,544,870.79. Item 10B approves adopting a resolution requesting SCORE funding from Ramsey County to financially assist the city of Roseville with its curbside residential recycling program. Item 10C approves a conditional use to allow for a drive-through as part of the new Starbucks at 2020 Twin Lakes Parkway, west of the Walmart store. The proposed drive-through was reviewed by the Planning Commission at its October 5th meeting and was recommended for approval on a 6-0 vote. And finally, agenda item 10D approves a contract amendment for maintenance services with SEH for the Fairview Avenue Water Tower due to delays in completing the work. SEH and the city are agreeing to extend the maintenance work out to 2027. Work to be done includes a new interior coating system in 2023 and general maintenance and inspection services up to 2027. Funds for this work are included in the city's CIP, and that is the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Groff. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Those items are approved. That brings us to future agenda review, communications reports, and announcements. And I'll turn it over first to Mr. Trudgeon for the review of upcoming agendas.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, our next meeting is November 7th. We'll start the evening with an EDA meeting. We have several items on there regarding a loan document and subordination agreement for the harbor development. We have some renewal of professional service agreements with a variety of our vendors, talk about the 2023 meeting calendar and try to set that, at least for the EDA portion, and then have a review of the Choose Roseville campaign. We'll then transition to the city council meeting. We'll discuss the 2023 utility rates and the fee schedule. Once again, we want to introduce those and answer any questions and bring those forward for adoption at the end of the year. We'd also plan to talk about changes to Chapter 309 regarding massage therapy establishments in particular, but the whole chapter. We've been working on that language and want to bring that forward for at least a discussion. Want to talk about the 2023 City Council and EDA calendar, and we do anticipate appointing a youth commissioner as part of our consent agenda. I would note that on November 16th, which is not a typical time we have a meeting, we will need to convene the city council to canvass the general election results from the previous week. We did talk about this last meeting here and picked November 16th, which is a Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. It will be a one agenda item and should be 5 to 10 minutes. And then on November 28th, that's the week after Thanksgiving, we'll hold the public hearings that we typically have regarding the budget and the tax levy. Also hold public hearings for the 2023 liquor license renewals. We want to bring forward a discussion about no mow May or mow less May. That's something that will sneak up on us before we know. We want to just bring forward some ideas and have a discussion. We also anticipate awarding the city attorney contract for 23 and beyond. There is a minor plat, as I understand it, for 2867 Dale Street that will be coming straight to the council, and also begin the conversation around legislative priorities for the upcoming session.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Are there any questions on the upcoming agendas or city council member initiated items for future meetings? Any announcements or communications from council members? All right, the only,
That's a good question.
Councilmember Strawn.
Mr. Trudgeon, can you clarify what is the topic of the Roseville Business Council on Wednesday? We've seen two different items.
Yes, it's my understanding we're going to be talking, it will be two items, but an update on the strategic racial equity plan and also kind of a development update by community development staff. So it's kind of a two-for meeting. You get to learn a lot about what the city's doing, certainly around equity work, but also talk about the development things that we're seeing and experiencing. So well worth the price of admission.
There we go, 2 for 1. All right, thank you.
I recently began my appointment with the Board of Metro Cities, and one of their first options will be addressing our legislative agendas, so I look forward to bringing our ideas to them and their ideas back to us.
Thank you. If there's no further business before the council, we have nothing else on our agenda but a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Strawn.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Groff. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0, and we are adjourned at 8:22. Thank you, everyone.